I would like to start with a short clarification for anyone wishing to duplicate the proof. You must use the data for the atomic masses of the atoms and their isotopes, not atomic weights. The data should be precise to about 9 places of decimal or more, and only data that is experimentally derived is acceptable. Data that is purely mathematically derived is subject to systemic error and is unacceptable. I would like it to be understood that I have not presented anything theoretical here. This is simply a straightforward statistical analysis of hard scientific data and fact. This is what the data tells us. It tells us that electrons and nucleons are made up of only one type of elementary particle of matter. If any other particles of matter were present, such as quarks, the graph could not exist. It would be impossible for the graph to exist. The graph can only exist if, and only if, there is a single, fundamental, elementary particle of matter. Modern physics is unable to come up with a satisfactory model of the electron that can account for the spin characteristics they exhibit. The closest they can come is something resembling a toroidal ring. Well, of course, I doubt that they believe electrons to actually be tiny circular coils, but that is the closest model they can conceive of to account for the electron spin characteristics. The model suggested by the graph would be comprised of two coupled elementary particles, or half-licks, surrounded by an energy field. This model very nicely and intuitively accounts for all of an electron's spin characteristics. This model also explains why electrons pair up in superconducting superconductors, another anomaly of modern physics. The same model tells us why grand unification is so elusive, and what the universe looked like the instant before the Big Bang. It explains the fractional quantum Hall effect and radioactivity, and why there seems to be no end to the number of particles modern physics can discover. There is no phenomenon, anomalous or otherwise, that cannot be intuitively described in terms of this model. It is simply the model of everything, as opposed to the theory of everything. Because there is nothing theoretical involved, it is all about facts and the logical conclusions that they imply. I have been asked why I don't seek verification from experts in the field. Well, I have tried, but it seems that no self-respecting theoretical physicist would ever condescend to discuss theory with anyone outside of their old boys' club. And they would certainly not ever voluntarily admit the veracity of this proof and what it suggests. It would make them all look like idiots and fools. The beauty of this proof is that it has nothing to do with theory. There is nothing theoretical involved. There isn't even any algebra or calculus involved. It is a simple statistical analysis, and as such does not require verification by any physicist. Any mathematician can verify its veracity, and mathematicians have no vested interest to protect. So it is out of the hands of the vested interests of the physics community. It seems that the contemporary scientific mind cannot conceive of a universe that is so simple and easy to understand. Of course, that has to do with the fact that modern science sees the universe as something that is in a constant state of conflict. Everything has to be in opposition to everything else. Matter, antimatter, particles, antiparticles, positive and negative, up and down. Modern physicists live in a very black and white universe. It is then no wonder they need so many particles to account for all the diversity in the universe around them. They need a plethora of variables to add color to their drab universe, and all those variables and all the complexity they infuse make the whole science vague and obscure, and helps them maintain a mystique and ensure their priority. My universe is not black and white, and it is not a universe in conflict with itself. It is not made up of opposites. It is made up of complements. I do not see charges as positive and negative. I see them as more or less. Have you ever thought it odd that two particles with such huge differences in mass as proton and electron should carry exactly, not about or close to, but exactly the same amount of charge? This model explains why. It shows us that the reason the charges are equal is because it is the same particle responsible for both charges. It is not about positive and negative. It is about more or less electrons, because protons and electrons are made of the same thing, half-licks. The graph implies there are only two elementary particles, an elementary particle of matter, which I call a half-lick, and an elementary particle of energy, which everyone knows as a photon. Ask yourself this. If you were God and you were about to create a new universe, would you make that universe overly complex, with dozens of variables, so that the beings that inhabit it would be forever confused and perplexed? Or would you make the universe as simple as possible, use only two variables, and give its inhabitants the best possible chance to survive? Well, God or no God, you don't need dozens of particles or variables to create a universe with all the complexity and beauty of the one we live in. You only need two. As long as you don't impose a lot of artificial and arbitrary constraints on it. Fractals are beautiful mathematical patterns that, although they exhibit an overall symmetry, are not symmetrical. They are asymmetrical. They are also infinitely variable and are never exactly the same in any iteration. Many fractals imitate things in the natural world around us, like trees, ferns, grass, roots, and crystals, to mention a few. The interesting thing about fractals is that fractals only need two variables to produce all that variety and all that variability. What you get from a fractal depends on how you define those two variables. Now I venture into the realm of theory when I suggest that perhaps our universe is the result of a three-dimensional fractal, constructed from two three-dimensional variables, a variable of matter and a variable of energy. These are very amazing particles because everything in the universe, the whole blueprint for the universe, is written into the definition of those two variables and the fractal in which they reside. How amazing, how beautiful, and how elegant is that? So the challenge now becomes to try and define those two variables and that fractal. A task that could keep us busy for a few millennia, I suspect. Oh, brave new world that has such particles in it. Happy New Year!